Hey everybody, we're back with Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Playing this on Xbox One via backwards compatibility. Weird thing with that is it's the only game in the Sands of Time trilogy that's available on backwards compatibility for some reason. Warrior Within and Two Thrones both aren't. No idea why. Which is really disappointing.
Shall I go on? Shall I go on? Shall I go on?
There's the max. Take a look at the game. Yeah, Sands of Time. Playing this on Xbox One via backwards compatibility. You may notice small black bars on the side of the screen. Usually I take care of that. I adjust the screen and have the side bit deal with that. It is still there, as you can see. The weird thing is, Sands of Time, for some reason, is less than 4x3. And I don't really know why. Anyway. Started.
Most people think time is like a river that flows swift and sure in one direction. But I have seen the face of time, and I can tell you, they are wrong. Time is an ocean in a storm. You may wonder who I am and why I say this. Sit down, and I will tell you a tale like none that you have ever heard. Know first that I am the son of Shaun, a mighty king of Persia. On our way to Azad with a small company of men, we passed through India, where the promise of honor and glory tempted my father into a grievous error.
No, my son.
Your Majesty, I trust you remember your promise. The Maharaja's treasure vaults lie within.
See how he fights. Like a warrior son.
Do you think I felt regret as I gazed upon the destruction we had wrought? Or at least humility at the speed with which a world can be transformed from a good world into a hell? If you think so, you are mistaken. For in that moment I thought of one thing only. The honor and glory I would bring my father by fighting like a warrior in my first battle.
Okay, so one thing you get with Sands of Time is a complete lack of subtitles.
Shall I go on? Shall I go on?
Which is kind of a pain because most of the exposition in the game and dialogue and stories delivered outside of cutscenes.
Then I'll continue.
Yeah, Sands of Time, classic, came out in 2003, I think. Big thing when it first came out was the, for me anyway, when I first saw it, was the wall running, which I thought was really cool. Never really seen anything like that. And it's still really cool. Like, the platforming in this game is still, like, its best feature. Camera was moving on its own a bunch there, that was weird. gentlemen. Hey, Titanium. How you doing, buddy? Yeah, the combat's fine. Until later in the game, where they start drawing out the combat encounters excessively.
Many men that day sought to win honor and glory on the battlefield, that their king might say to them...
Yeah, for me, the best thing of this game has always been the platforming.
You are the noblest of my warriors. From the moment my sword tasted blood, I knew this would not be my way. I would win my father's praise.
Hey, Ox, how you doing, buddy?
But by being the first to find the Maharaja's treasure vault and the wonders within.
Let's do this. See, Ascent of Time's a good game, overall. The biggest problem with it is, later in the game, the combat really becomes tedious. And there are a couple of reasons for that we'll get to. Stealth kills in Two Thrones, not a bad idea. The biggest problem with Two Thrones is that so much of it is QTEs. And then Warrior Within came out and was like this, but played better. Presented worse, undeniably, but played way. But we'll get to that. Part of the reason I'm playing this is so we can get to Warrior Within. Yeah, later in the game, just start doing like stuff like the dagger counter, which is like an immediate kill, just to try and get through the combat faster. But for me, when I first played this, the thing that really got me about it was the platforming. Like, it was so cool. Like this. I'd never seen a game where you could do that before. Yeah, I do like Warrior Within's soundtrack as well. I know some people really aren't into it for its more metal feeling, but I do really like it. Now, I was saying when we started, like, it's weird. We're playing this on Xbox One via backwards compatibility. This is the only game in the series to be on here, except for Forgotten Sands. There's this, and there's Forgotten Sands. There's no Warrior Within, there's no Two Thrones. Which is weird, because they were both on original Xbox. See, I argue that Warrior Within is the best. And Two Thrones would take it for me, if it wasn't for the QTEs. The QTEs kill it for me. I think this kind of thing is what Assassin's Creed is really missing. The open world design of Assassin's Creed from the start has just been much less interesting than the focused stuff, the focused pathways you can get from games like this. Which isn't necessarily the fault of Assassin's Creed. It's just a problem with open world games in general. Yeah, I can very much understand that, Ox. Warrior Within is my favourite, but that is entirely because of gameplay. I think the gameplay in Warrior Within is the best of the series. Presentation-wise, it's the worst. It looks the blandest.
Shall I continue my story from here?
As much as I enjoy the rock music, it doesn't really add to the atmosphere like the music of this game or Two Thrones does. I just prefer it because of the gameplay. Assassin's Creed isn't a bad series by any stretch. I don't know if I'm going to get the remake, honestly. I mean, I'm going through this now, and I'm probably not going to want to go through this game again for several years. We'll have to see how it turns out.
There it lay, just out of reach.
If they improve the combat, maybe.
There was a treasure I could carry with pride as a trophy of our victory.
But yeah, Assassin's Creed is a decent enough series. But the open world design leads to a lack of focus from the things you'd get in the linear, like the linear paths. Like if there were like 20 ways to get through this room, rather than the one specific path, it leads to less focus in the design. You know, I've still not done the original Assassin's Creed. I started with Assassin's Creed 2. Avoid spiky poles. I have Assassin's Creed 1 and I've just not gone around to it. See, I didn't get bored with an Assassin's Creed until Origins. I played it for like 2 hours and was so bored. This isn't Phase on stream, Orcs. We don't tolerate that kind of nonsense here. But no, seriously. I did want to play the original Assassin's Creed. And when I first got a PS3, I just couldn't find it anywhere. So eventually I just ended up reading the plot on Wikipedia and picking up Assassin's Creed 2. Which I was happy with. Assassin's Creed 2 is a fantastic game. Alright. Thanks for dropping in, Ox. You have yourself a good day, buddy. You take care. My buy it on Series S. If the Series S had a disc drive, I would be all over it. Because like the price point of that is so appealing. But the lack of a disc drive is just like, no. There's the dagger. It's all good, Titanium. You're honestly doing me a favour by keeping me company. Yeah, the only Assassin's Creed I've played that I got bored with was like Origins. I played it for like 2 hours and was just really bored and stopped. I picked up Odyssey and I've put like 80 plus hours into that. Odyssey's fine. The gameplay isn't great though, I'll definitely admit that. Like, especially the combat, and they draw it out so much, and the level scaling is bullshit. But Odyssey and Origins in the same way is... They're designed to be games that you'll play for such a long time and then eventually just get bored of. Which is the point I'm really at with Odyssey.
I had what I came for.
I finished the main story, I finished the cult storyline. And at this point I'm just kind of sick of the gameplay. Yeah, that worked.
Father.
I think one thing that really helps this game in terms of its story is the dialogue that goes along. Because a lot of your story and character development is delivered through dialogue outside of cutscenes, which means you don't have to stop every 5 minutes to progress the story, to progress the cutscenes or anything. A lot of the story is the prince and Farah just getting to know each other and overcoming challenges together.
And some exotic animals for his menagerie.
And I think that overall is why the story of this is as strong as it is. Because it's very character focused, while not stopping the gameplay for the sake of it.
I have chosen. Let it be known, King Sharaman is merciful in victory.
On the opposite side, the problem with that is that this game doesn't have subtitles.
Trust not a man who has betrayed his master, nor take him into your own service, lest he betray you too. I learned the truth of this to my sorrow, the day that we arrived in Azad as the Sultan's honored guests.
My friend.
My friend, your visit brings joy and honor to my poor...
He talks to himself a lot in this one. Like, there's a specific line I can think of that comes up several times, like, why am I talking to myself? Why am I still talking to myself?
And yet, the best is yet to come. I give you the sands of time. May the friendship between our kingdoms endure as long as time itself.
The sand, why does it glow?
I can tell you. Inside the hourglass is a marvel that no living man has seen. Alas, only the dagger can unlock the sands of time, and it belongs to a greater one than I. A young prince.
That makes
more to
sense.
his father than all the wealth of India. Perhaps he will oblige.
No. No! Stop!
So when I first played this game, this is where, like, this took me completely by surprise the way this happened. Because I hadn't seen any of the monster stuff. And so when this happens, and it's actually kind of horrifying, I was actually really surprised on my first playthrough.
Give me the dagger. No. You have unleashed the sands of time. I can undo what you have done. Give it to me. No.
I always kind of wonder what happens to those people that Farah's with. Because, like, they've got to be infected by the sands pretty quickly. Right, here we go. There we go. The instant kill dagger counter.
Prince, use the dagger.
Each time I struck them down, they rose to fight again. I soon realized that only by taking into my own dagger sands that
I think this becomes a problem with the combat overall
Strike with the dagger. Take his sand.
as the game goes on, because you can only really finish any enemy with the dagger while they're down. And so every combat encounter becomes dealing with more and more enemies, specifically to knock them into a down state to stab them with the dagger. Oh, I know exactly the movie you're talking about, Titanium. Like, there are ways to deal with them and knock them down. There's a bunch of ways. Regular damage, specific moves, yada yada. But at the end of it, you're always aiming to knock them down and drain them with the dagger. And that's every combat encounter, as they keep throwing more and more enemies at you. And it gets to the point where you dread that noise that means more of them are teleporting in.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time. You think me mad. I can see it by the
There's some water over here.
You think my story is impossible. Perhaps I am mad. Who would not be driven mad by horrors such as I have lived? But I assure you, every word is true.
It's not just even combat, like, Warrior Within also expands the platforming. Which I really like as well. My platform is my favorite part of all of these games. And then Warrior Within expands the combat. It's not always about hitting them with a very specific attack. It's just about killing them as regular enemies. Which is something Two Thrones also does, because Two Thrones makes the dagger your standard weapon, rather than a side weapon.
The guest rooms, where my father, all our entourage, and I should have passed the night lay cold and silent. The sands of time had swept through, stealing life and warmth from everything they touched. And
Yeah.
I, who unleashed the cataclysm, had been spared. Were there others like me who yet clung to life, hiding in
And stuff
fear and
like that.
ruins?
That kind of thing is why I think the platforming in Prince of Persia being linear works better than anything that Assassin's Creed tries to do that's similar. Because it's focused pathways. You end up with something like the Haka Chase in Assassin's Creed, and you could run anywhere and lose it really quickly because it's a linear pathway rather than a scripted sequence. You're gonna have to have a limit for it to chase you as a result.
Had I really seen her? Or had my senses given way under the burden of horrors too great to bear, and conjured up a phantom? Either way, I could not rest until I had found her again.
It's one of those things, like, linearity seems to be like a dirty word in games these days, and it really shouldn't be. Because a focused gameplay design can be just as, if not more, enjoyable than an open world design. The original Prince of Persia is one of those step-by-step platformers where you move on a grid of sorts. A big part of the difficulty with that isn't just that it's one of those kind of platformers. Like, if you've ever played Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, it's that kind of platformer. But you also have 90 minutes to complete it before the princess dies. And the game does count that down. If you played the Super Nintendo version, they added a couple of levels to it, so the time limit is expanded to 2 hours. There we go. Yeah, it's something that used to happen in some of the older games. Not super common because of the restrictions it imposes. but it is something you used to see every now and then. Like D on PlayStation and Saturn also had a 2-hour time limit, and you had to finish the game in 2 hours or you died. I think it works for that because it's a horror game. I've said this before, and I think the natural progression of the Prince of Persia style platformer into 3D was Tomb Raider. Like exactly what the original Tomb Raider was doing.
Done. I'll start the story.
I think that's made even more of a point with Prince of Persia 3D, which was the first 3D Prince of Persia game, was a Tomb Raider clone.
Like fever dreams. Each time I awoke feeling drained and beaten.
Oh yeah, that was always a cool detail.
What I had seen came to pass.
After the first boss fight, there's only 2 boss fights. Well, that was weird. After the first boss fight, he tears one sleeve off, and then later on he tears off the other sleeve. And then after he falls down a pit, he tears off the rest of his clothing because they've all gotten torn and he's got scars and stuff. It's a nice detail. And I don't think I saw something like that again until Arkham Asylum, which then became a staple of the Arkham series. As each game would go on, Batman's suit would get more and more damaged.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a real shame that the other 2 games in the Sands of Time trilogy aren't backwards compatible on Xbox. I'd pick them up. I'd pick them up and play the hell out of them again.
What the? Hello? Is anyone there? I have a feeling I'm not in Azad anymore.
I don't mind the DLC suits not getting damaged. One thing I liked that Arkham Knight introduced, and it was only put in Arkham Knight, and it was an update that was added later, an option to play with the standard suit without battle damage. Because it's a nice suit, and, like, I don't always want the damage for it.
The miracle I had experienced by accident in the Maharaja's treasure room, I now discovered that I could trigger at will. By pressing a switch on the dagger's handle, I could turn back time.
If I could turn back time. Yeah, the first time I used the dagger was always going to be a stupid death. It's one of the things that makes this game so bearable, because there's going to be stupid platforming deaths, but having the ability to rewind makes it a lot more bearable. And then there's the sequence you get later on in the game, right near the end, where you don't have the dagger. And it's one of the hardest platforming sequences, particularly because if you mess up, you go back to a checkpoint.
I am Farah, the daughter of the Maharaja from whom you stole it. This is your doing,
I saw my father turn to sand.
and we will share his fate if you do not give me the dagger to undo what you have done.
Your traitorous vizier used the same words. From now on, I trust no one but myself. Run! Go back to the reception hall. Wait for me there. Go!
Ah, the scarabs. The button mashy enemy.
Now I remembered her. Since we left India, she had been there. In the desert, I had felt her dark eyes upon me. Now, here she was again. She and I, the only 2 survivors. Did I say 2? Excuse me. We were 3.
I come from this way. Ah, there we go. Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, just the concession of being able to rewind and undo a stupid death really makes the game. Because without it, the game would be incredibly frustrating. Oh yeah, it's such a well-designed game. There's so many reasons why I would call this specific era, the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era, the best era of gaming. Cool little details you can find. The controls are more refined than they were for 3D than they were in the PS1 era. Game development didn't cost as much, so you could have more interesting variety. Rather than everything being the same to try and capitalize on a previously popular trend. Try and make as much money as possible, to try and make back how much you've spent.
Understand the meaning of what I had just seen.
The lack of updates and DLC meaning the game was released as complete as it could be, and if it was broken, then that itself was a problem, so companies were more inclined to try and game work.
Now had his prize, and for some unknown purpose coveted the dagger as well. Would stop at nothing to possess it. Well,
Yeah, pretty much.
what he sought. I would plunge it into his foul and treacherous heart.
Becomes the thing, like we talk about the remake, and you know, before we go into that, it's not as though this era game was perfect. It's not as though games weren't released broken and buggy and look at Driver 3. Yeah, going into like the higher poly count and the frame rate and everything. The remake of this that's coming out, and everybody's like, "Oh, it looks terrible from what we've seen." And it brings to mind stuff like the Crash and Spyro remakes, which, yeah, there's all the lighting and the physics and like got a higher poly count, and especially in Spyro, I think it makes the gameplay worse. Because I was sat there playing the Spyro Reignited trilogy, and I specifically had a harder time finding one specific gem in a level than I would have in the original, because they'd added grass foliage to the level, which covered up the gem, which wouldn't have existed there in the original. And so for the sake of visual design, you've obscured gameplay elements. Plus, there's also the thing of, like, recreating an atmosphere like this, design like this. They often just miss the mark completely when they do that kind of thing. It's one of the reasons why, as good as Ocarina of Time 3D is, I still prefer playing the original. Yeah, indie games are like the last place where a lot of experimentation happens. And it's why indie games are more interesting now than they ever have been. And more interesting than most of the big AAA stuff. Because they'll do weird and interesting stuff. Maybe it'll fail, maybe it won't. But it'll be interesting. And look at like, all the great stuff we've gotten out of that. I thought that would be the last one. I thought it said 5. I'm sure that was 5. Oh well. But yeah, this is my favourite era of gaming because I feel like it's when gaming was at its peak before industry bloat really started to happen. Or really started to set in. That becomes a way of, like, as the combat encounters get longer and longer, that becomes one of your main methods of telling, is the combat done yet? Because if it is, the prince will stop, and then it'll flash to show him sheathing the sword and the dagger. It's like, oh, he hasn't done that yet? Well, I guess we're doing more combat. think the biggest shame of this generation is just how hard it is to get access to a lot of these games. It's one of the best things Xbox is doing, and has been doing. Although with the last set of backwards compatibility games they put out, they said, "Oh, thanks for the stream, Cap. Thanks, thank you for the follow, Captain 3059. Welcome to the stream, buddy." With the last set of backwards compatible games Xbox added, they said, like, this is really the last. Any other games that you might want aren't going to be added for various reasons, whether they be technical, licensing issues, yada yada. Which is understandable, though it's really kind of a shame we're not going to get stuff like the Bond games on Xbox One. So you want to play those, you got to go back to those original systems. The easiest of which to emulate is the GameCube. Dolphin has had some fantastic work put into it, and it's unbelievable just how impressive Dolphin has become.
I soon discovered that when I had collected enough sand, the dagger gained the power to stop time. Not for me, but for the enemy I struck.
Yeah, with it being such a good era of gaming, it's a shame that it's so hard to get a lot of the stuff for it. Like, regularly stream that generation on this channel anyway. It's like, hey, what are we currently streaming at the minute? Persona 3. PS2 game. What were we doing before that? Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. What were we doing before that? That was Final Fantasy 7 actually. What we were doing before that. And of course we did Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2 last year. And like, all of those games, they may have been re-released in some form or another, in forms that are weaker than their original release, which is the worst part. Like, Sands of Time HD. I have the Sands of Time HD trilogy on PS3. And they are absolute shit. Honestly, such garbage versions. Prone to crashing at a drop of a hat. Sound mixing is awful. They look absolutely terrible. Basically, no work's been put into them. And it's really the case with a lot of like more modern re-releases of these old games, that they look and or run and or sound worse than the original release. Even a lot of the best HD collections have various issues that weren't in the original releases. Oh yeah, picking them up for the price as well. Like the Shin Megami Tensei games, I was remarking on this with Chansom a few times. The SMT games on PS2 have all jumped up in price. So if you want to play them...
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
What option do you have? PS2 emulation still isn't great. Well, that's the thing as well. The HD trilogy, the Sands of Time HD trilogy, never patched. And then there's stuff like, I have the Silent Hill HD collection on Xbox because it's backwards compatible for some goddamn reason. So I picked it up, I got it cheap in a sale. The Silent Hill HD collection did get a patch to try and improve some of its issues, which are widely known and numerous. That patch was only on PS3. The Xbox didn't get that patch. So the Silent Hill HD collection on Xbox 360, which is backwards compatible on Xbox One, still has all of those issues. And it's the same with the Zone of the Enders HD collection. Konami put out a patch for Zone of the Enders HD collection that only affected the second runner. Fixed the problems with Zone of the Enders second runner, and again, only on PS3. And again, the collection is backwards compatible on Xbox One. But it's still got all of those issues. The weirdest thing with the Silent Hill stuff as well is, like, why not make the original Xbox version of Silent Hill 2 backwards compatible? Because Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 4 were on original Xbox. Digital Foundry Retro did an interesting dive into all the versions of Silent Hill 2. And the best of them technically is... Technically?
Oh, thank God! I was afraid
Like everything it does, the best of them is the PS2 version. But the Xbox is a close second. And it actually has better lighting effects on the flashlight, which is interesting.
I'll reset the axles for you. The man who's normally in charge of this got... Never mind. Ride the platform down to the bottom, then use those two cranks to bring it back up. You see those 4 axles? You'll need to pick them up one by one until you've got all 4. Then, bring them up to the top together. Make sure you pick them up in the right order.
Right? Yeah, like the lighting effects they did on the flashlight
That's it.
are actually better.
You've got the first axle. Now, pick up the other 3.
Yes, Warrior Within.
Remember, pay attention to the grooves.
Warrior Within was lighter on puzzles, though the same is also true of...
That's it. One crank turns the platform. The other one raises and lowers it.
The same is also true of Two Thrones. Two Thrones was also lighter on puzzles. I once heard it described as like each game in the Sands of Time trilogy having a specific focus. With Sands of Time focusing on puzzles, Warrior Within focusing on combat, and Two Thrones focusing on stealth. Which seems right.
That's 2.
I was really not fond of the stealth sections in Two Thrones. Again, it's largely because the stealth kills are QTEs.
One more.
It's like you go and you do the stealth kill, and it would basically be a QTE, which I felt like wasn't really. The timing on it was really
Bring
strict.
them up to the top and line them up with their gears.
See, the problem with QTEs isn't so much that they exist as when they are too prevalent an aspect of the game. A QTE here and there isn't a bad thing. The problem is when the QTEs are just all over the place. And it's a problem
That's it!
that
I knew you
God of
could
War
do
had
it!
for a while.
Now, there's one last step. Do you see that platform? Throw your lever, and I'll throw mine.
What manner of machine is this?
Ha! We did it! Serve those accursed demons right! Oh, by God, they'll rue the day they ever dared attack the Palace of Azad!
Oh, there you go, Titanium. So yeah, that's the dumbest decision the prince makes in the game. He is very loud. There's also a thing, like, I talk about the sound mixing in the Sands of Time HD trilogy. And part of the issue there is that all of the sounds are set up to echo for some reason. As if you're in like a big hall or something. Like that would echo as if you're in like some big empty chamber. Everything would, including the voices.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time. What have I done?
Honestly, I have no idea what they were doing with it. The best I can think is it was a really just lazy setup.
The palace's defenses had a twisted logic of their own. They could be circumvented by using the strategically placed switches, which I soon learned to recognize. Yet it was hard to escape the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake by setting in motion such a deadly system of traps, which seemed in truth more likely to claim my life than that of an invader that was not flesh and blood.
Yeah, Ubisoft, there was the big thing at the time of like a bunch of HD ports were coming out of previous generation games. Which I think probably started with maybe Metal Gear Solid HD. I might be wrong, but that was like one of the earliest and one of the best. And it sold well because, you know, it had for one the subsistence version of MGS3, which was always kind of a pain in the ass to get hold of, which makes the game so much more playable by giving you the proper camera. Every There are some really good HD collections, like Metal Gear Solid HD collection. The ones Sony did were all really good. The God of War collections, the Sly trilogy, which I think only had like one issue. But other than that, it was very playable. The Ratchet and Clank HD trilogy. But like every HD trilogy collection that Ubisoft put out had like serious issues and was just not worth getting. There was the Sands of Time trilogy, there was the Splinter Cell HD trilogy, which was really shit. And cut stuff out, actually. From some of the releases, because I think they were just based on PC releases. So they didn't have any of the console exclusive levels. I think Rayman 3 HD was okay, but I've not properly looked into it. Beyond Good and Evil HD was probably the best they ever did. Even that still had some issues.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
Here's the thing though, if you want to play all of those, like, all of the Splinter Cell games are backwards compatible on Xbox, which is really neat. So I have them all on Xbox now. The first one, Pandora Tomorrow, Chaos Theory, Double Agent, both versions of Double Agent. So the original Xbox release and the Xbox 360 release, which follow the same plot but are basically two different games. Conviction and Blacklist. I've never played either of those. Beyond Good and Evil HD is backwards compatible on Xbox 360 and I've got it. Rayman 3 HD is backwards compatible on Xbox and I've got it. It's kind of a real shame that only the first Sands of Time game is backwards compatible on Xbox One. Because regardless of like which one is your preferred, which one is your favourite, which one you'd rather play, all three of the Sands of Time games are good. They're all worth playing. That's fair enough. And the PS5 having the backwards compatibility for PS4 is a good thing. Although, currently with so little actually out for the
Strange.
new generation, still,
I feel as if I've been here before.
of either system, PS5 or Xbox, I'd still go for Xbox.
Before.
Because the Xbox Series X will do everything the Xbox One can. Which is great, it means I don't have to get rid of any of these games, because I won't have a system that can play them anymore. And I like that, it's a good idea. But yeah, I have all of them at this point. I don't have a new console.
Longer than ever.
Final Fantasy 14, I've not done that in years. I put my time into that game, and I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the time I spent on it. I can't go back to it. The subscription and the time sink of it, I can't go back to it. If I could do it casually without having to pay for it, then that'd be fine. If it was like a pay once thing. But no, with the subscription thing of like I'm paying for it, and while I'm paying for it, I want to be getting the most out of what I'm paying. No. God damn it. What I would do back when I was playing 14 was every now and then I'd get a 30-day sub for it. and then I would play the hell out of it 30 days and just burn myself out on it. I considered that, because the trial's free till Heaven's Ward. But I think the restrictions on the trial are a little too much. Like, not being able to create a party. Like, it'd be a lot of fun to get a few people together and just do it on the free trial. Like, not being able to create a party means you can't then do dungeons without that setup. Yeah, as it is, I've got too many games. God damn it. I've got too many games that I've paid for once that I'm just not playing anyway. I understand some of the restrictions, just like making parties, it feels like such an essential thing. But the game's changed a lot since I was last playing it anyway. I haven't played it since just before Stormblood came out. I was playing it with, I had a bunch of friends I was playing it with. They were more into it than I was, but I was getting more into like some of the endgame stuff, like the raiding and stuff. I was getting into that. But my internet was absolute shit at the time, and that was the kicker. That was the main reason why I ended up stopping. Because my internet just wouldn't support it. I'm on better internet now, of course, like I stream and everything, so there's that. But like, the time sink of it just doesn't appeal to me anymore. So, this is one of 2 boss fights in the game. And this is probably the first place you're really going to get stuck, and I think there's good reason for that. And I think it's because they introduced too many mechanics at once. So you've got the combat as you've been doing it, and as you've been doing the combat, most likely on your first playthrough, this will probably be all you've been doing. Jumping over your enemies to knock them down. Because it's simple, it's effective, and you haven't met an enemy that won't work on yet. The blue guards with the double-ended spears won't work on them. See? Can't do it. That's one new mechanic. The next new mechanic that's introduced here is Farah. This is where you're introduced to protecting Farah. Doing that during a boss fight, introducing that during a boss fight, bad idea. And then the third thing you've got is the boss. The monster, like, you've not faced before. And so you've got to learn how to deal with all 3 of these new ideas all at once. And I think that is a bad idea. If they introduced all of these mechanics one by one, wouldn't be as much of a problem. Doing them all together is why this fight is such a problem on your first time.
Behind you.
Hate it when the enemies get in the way of each other. There's also the point of, like, this is your longest combat encounter to this point as well. Yeah. So like I said, I think introducing all of those ideas one by one would have been a better idea.
Why?
All together,
I know
no.
what it is to lose a father.
That was not my father.
Even after that, like the blue guys with double-ended spears don't show up all that often. For a while.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
You got that boss. Like there's only two bosses in the game. There's that guy and then there's the Vizier at the end of the game. And the Vizier is the worst fight.
So, this is the thanks I get for saving your life.
You don't understand. I need that dagger to undo.
To undo what I have done. Truly you must think I'm a fool.
You are right to be cautious. But fight as bravely as you may, you cannot defeat this enemy. The sands will spread. They will consume everything. I have heard it said that you are kind as well as brave. Please believe me. Help me find the hourglass.
It is in the Sultan's treasure vault, atop the Tower of Dawn.
How do you know that?
I just know. Come with me then if you insist.
It's never explained in game why Farah isn't affected by the sands or the Vizier. The manual, I remember, explained that the reason the prince isn't affected is the dagger, which you could make sense of anyway. The reason Farah isn't affected is her bow, and the reason the Vizier isn't affected is his staff. But with Farah and the bow, that feels like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Especially since she didn't have the bow when we first met her.
Wait!
I think with Farah it ends up being her medallion. Which the prince gets in Warrior Within.
And you were worried about me keeping up. I'll cover.
Yeah, I think that's what it ends up being.
You're liable to hit me.
Whether or not they end up retconning it or not, I don't know. But it's what I assume. As like I say, the prince ends up getting it in Warrior Within. Yeah, absolutely. I miss game manuals. But yeah, the prince ends up having the medallion in Warrior Within, and since the dagger doesn't actually exist in Warrior Within, the medallion is supposed to be how you do all the time manipulation stuff, like the rewind and everything. God, would you stop stabbing the wrong people? Farah, why did you come down here? I miss game manuals. It's another... The loss of game manuals is another example of... the sacrifice publishers make
Now,
to cut costs while also not reducing price. And we've seen that, I think it started with game manuals, and then there was the codes. Oh yeah, I used to do the same thing. Like, I'd go out and buy a new game, read the manual on the way home. On the bus home. It was great, it was always fun. I think the cost stuff, like, it really started with the manuals and then there were the codes of like, hey, you want to access online features or like specific parts of the game? Here's a code that can only be used once.
Are you alright?
How long was I out?
Long enough. What if the sand creatures came back?
They won't. Not here anyway.
The one that pissed me off the most with that was Arkham City.
Are you alright?
Stay there!
I think before Arkham City, it was a case of it was always online codes to play the online multiplayer or whatever. And then Arkham City came out, and the code for that was Catwoman.
She tried to steal my dagger after I saved her life. She would have left me there to die. And here I am, risking my life for her again. And why? Good question.
Arkham City was coming out, and the ability to play Catwoman, and Catwoman having her own part of the story, was a big part of the promotional stuff. And the game comes out, and it's like, hey, Catwoman is a DLC code that will come with the game. So if you buy it secondhand, you don't get access to Catwoman. Or if you don't have your console connected to the internet, you don't get access to Catwoman. About the whole thing, like, to try and reduce costs and make money back as however they can. Oh, you bought the game secondhand? Well, let's try and get some money out of you anyway. And then there were, like, the DLCs that have just gotten more and more excessive as a way of just trying to get more money without reducing costs. Like, games just being released basically incomplete, but still for the same price. Yeah, there is that. Like, it's all about reducing the cost of it, but not reducing the price. It's like you've got the whole thing of like, oh yeah, no, we need to increase the cost of games. Like, the price of gaming hasn't gone up in years. Like, $60 price tag is outdated. And it's like, you've got that. It's like, you know what, you might have a point if you hadn't already been taking measures to deal with that. Like microtransactions and your rampant DLC and season passes. And it's like, okay, so if you're going to stick up the price... Yeah, that was not helpful. You're going to stick up the price. Are you going to cut out the microtransactions then? Of course not. They're still there. Because at no point is it ever about how much a game costs, it's about how much money can be made. Like I say, I think that started with the removal of game manuals, and we're at the point now where it is. The less work they have to put into it, less it'll cost to make, the more money they can get, the higher the profit margin. Absolutely. Like, you look back at stuff like... Do you remember the outrage over the Oblivion Horse Armor DLC? I remember that being a big scandal at the time. that there was a piece of DLC for Oblivion that gave your horse armor that did nothing but change its appearance. And people were up in arms about that, and now it's just the most common thing. And people are like, well, as long as those things are only cosmetic and don't actually give you an advantage or a disadvantage. Only cosmetic. And you're absolutely right, it's about drip feeding it. And people complain, and you just keep going until those people are just like, well, complaining hasn't done anything, I guess we should just stop complaining and deal with it. That in itself, that exact idea is why I'm always cynical about protests. Yeah, Battlefront 2, which was crazy with microtransactions and progression bullshit. It's actually a game well worth playing now, actually. Like, it's a really good multiplayer shoot with a lot of content that they added for free. No DLC to buy or anything, it's all just microtransactions and shit. The sad thing is, it's like the best example of a big turnaround. It was bad to begin with, but the way they've sorted it is better. Except, you know, it's still the idea that we would have rioted against 10 years ago. No, I've got it because, you know, Star Wars. I'm an idiot. But I got it on a sale at one point a few years back, and it's a solid shooter. It's a solid multiplayer shooter. The campaign's shit,
But also beautiful.
but the gameplay is pretty decent. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to play. If you're into that kind of game, it's one of the best you can play. Of course, another part of the problem with that was that it was the second Star Wars game EA put out.
We'll need to find a way.
They had the Star Wars license for like there was a specific meme I saw that really illustrated the whole thing of EA having the exclusive publishing rights for Star Wars for 6 years, and they put out 2 games. Battlefront, which was bare bones as fuck, which was one of the biggest problems with it. The fact that the game was so light on content. And adding more content to it was a season pass. And Battlefront 2, which was the mess at launch, had all those issues with the microtransactions and stuff. And that was a 6-year period. Meanwhile, LucasArts, in a 6-year period in the mid-2000s, put out like 15 games.
I'll just wait here then. Shall I?
Yeah, I've never liked Borderlands, mostly because I don't like a game where I can have a gun and shoot somebody in the head, and that's not going to work as it should because of levels. I hate that. It's one of the same things like I really don't like about Assassin's Creed Odyssey. The assassinate ability should just kill people. But no, if their health is too high, or my stabbing ability isn't high enough, or whatever, then it won't kill them. It'll just injure them. And I absolutely hate that. As far as I'm aware, the KOTOR remake isn't out.
I've got it. Your turn now.
I played Knights of the Republic last year for Star Wars month. This was the whole thing I was doing of, like, May would be Star Wars month. And this year, May was kind of a mess, honestly. But last year I did Knights of the Republic and Jedi Fallen Order for Star Wars month. And I'll be honest with you, I spent most of Knights of the Old Republic really bored. Part of that is probably because I've played it before, and it is one of the most standard Star Wars stories you'll ever see. Of course, the gameplay was never great. It's the really old school BioWare dice roll system.
Your turn now.
I mean, if you've never played KOTOR before, you'd probably be into the story at least once. Listen, my problem was that I'd done it before. And the story itself is a very standard Star Wars story. I think, like, KOTOR 2 does way more interesting stuff with it. To be fair, I also don't look at the gaming stuff that much anymore. Like, Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is supposed to be coming out next month. I haven't looked into anything of it since the last trailer was released, which I only knew was released because it pops up on a gaming page I follow, which I don't even properly follow. Like, I'll get gaming headlines and every now and then I'll look at one of them. Alright. There it is. You really start to dread that noise. What, for Lego Star Wars? Lego Star Wars, the release date for Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga was originally put out as 2020. It was delayed, and then they didn't talk about it for like over a year. There we go. It's a shame because it looks like the most fun Star Wars thing in a while. Yeah. That said, though, the last batch of backwards compatible games that Microsoft put out for Xbox One included 2 more Star Wars games. Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, which is a decent game, and the Xbox version of Jedi Outcast, which, honestly, I was so happy about getting. PS4 and Switch port is shit. Because it's a basic-ass PC port that's been put out with no consideration for console concerns. And so getting the Xbox, the original Xbox port backwards compatible was fantastic. I immediately went and bought it. And I'm thinking about streaming it sometime soon. I've got both that and its sequel, Jedi Academy, on Xbox, because that's backwards compatible. And they're great games. I was so excited when they announced Jedi Outcast was going to get ported to Switch. I bought it as soon as it came out, and I was like, what's wrong with this? Why doesn't it feel right? And it's because they ported it from PC with no console consideration.
Please be careful.
So it's completely missing stuff like auto-aim. So what it is basically a mouse and keyboard setup mapped to an analog stick, which doesn't work. It demands a level of accuracy from an analog stick that you would get from a mouse, and it doesn't work that way.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time. I'm alright.
So that was a real shame. And then because of that, I was hesitant to get the Jedi Academy port that they put out. And then that came out and I heard it wasn't very good. Yeah, I'm hopeful for that, because I'd want to get it on Switch as well. Because I've got Lego Marvel Superheroes 2 on Switch and Lego DC Supervillains on Switch. And I really like them both. Lego DC Supervillains is kind of buggy, but like the core game is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. I really hope Skywalker Saga is good on Switch.
Where are we?
This was the Sultan's...
There it is, that's what I was after. Portable Lego games, it was kind of sad with portable Lego games. Because they started pretty good. Like, if you had a PSP, the Lego games on PSP were the full console versions, which was awesome. Like, Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, was the full console release on PSP. Lego Indiana Jones, Lego Batman, full console versions. And then they pushed them onto the HD consoles. They weren't made for the PS2, or the PS2 era consoles anymore. So they made a separate scene for making the portable versions of the Lego games, TT Fusion. And some of those portable versions were decent, but they also were very much not the console version. And there was also the thing of, like, with the Vita and the 3DS, the Lego games would just be the same between them. The Vita could probably handle the console versions of them, but no, they'd just get the same as the 3DS. The game that was made for the 3DS, which was really disappointing. Like I say, some of them were good. One of my... I have 8 Platinum trophies. One of them is for Lego Batman 2 on Vita. Yeah, they very much were. Lego Batman 2 on Vita and also 3DS, because it's the same game, isn't bad. I say I platinumed it, and it was fun. But with like how big Lego Batman 2 was on consoles, it was really disappointing that they didn't put that on Vita.
I wonder how they survived the sands.
I don't think they did survive.
Absolutely hate the birds game. Yeah, then the Switch comes out, and now you've got like the console versions portable again. That's really nice. Yeah, I don't really rely on Farah a whole lot to do much of anything. Yeah, as far as Lego games on the Switch goes, there is... I think I have all of them, except... They ported Lego Marvel Superheroes 1 to Switch recently. And I'd be down for picking that up at some point when it drops in price, because I already have it on PS4 and I already beat it on PS4.
Look, a crack.
But, I have Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, I have Lego DC Supervillains, I have Lego Worlds, and I have Lego City Undercover, and I've not played either of those properly. those last two. Like, having them on Switch is great. If you don't play them portable like that.
There's another crack. I'll see where it goes.
Because at their heart, they are fundamentally enjoyable games.
Fabled menagerie of Azad.
They're
Sultan's
repetitive,
pride
which
and joy.
why I
It had
won't
been one
play
of the
them back
wonders
to
of the world.
back.
As a child, I dreamed of it and longed to see it with my own eyes. Now it was a place.
Overall,
of
they are fun
an
enough
abandoned
games.
ruin laid waste by the sands of time.
Here I am.
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. I want to get Lego Star Wars on Switch. I have Lego Star Wars 3 on Xbox. It's backwards compatible. And I did do a little of it on stream once, and it was a really weirdly designed game. That's the Clone Wars one. There's the complete saga, which is fun, but like you've got to remember that was like the third Lego game they did of that style. Because they did Lego Star Wars, they did Lego Star Wars 2, and then there was Lego Star Wars Complete Saga. Yeah, very much. Definitely agree with that. And one of the things, like, Lego DC Supervillains has been one of my favourites, just because of, like, how it takes the DC stuff and has fun with it. Especially at a time where I'm, like, really tired of DC always being so dark and grim all the time. It's like, come on, you gotta remember just how stupid DC is. How stupid all the comics are. It's like, I was a big Star Wars fan at one point. And there is still a lot of love for it in my heart. But Star Wars is dumb and always has been. And stuff that makes fun of that, not maliciously, stuff that makes fun of it in a fun way, like the affectionate parody idea, can be really good. Like the Robot Chicken Star Wars stuff, which is Star Wars nerds making fun of Star Wars. It's like, it's great stuff. And that's one of the things Star Wars has always kind of had. Like, there's always been the stuff that made fun of Star Wars. Or the Star Wars stuff that's always kind of poked fun at itself as well.
Thanks.
But with DC, for like the last 10 years or so, it's always been so dark and grim and... So whenever there's something that does actually accept that it's stupid.
Tale until now, perhaps you will also believe me when I tell you that, as we made our way through the moonlit ruins,
and like have fun with that.
I was strangely drawn to the girl at my side.
And I really like that.
Well, she had good cause to hate me, yet she had proven herself a loyal companion. And I confess, I was grateful for the company of someone who, like me, was flesh and blood.
I can't reach it.
Yeah, I remember one of the early trailers for LEGO Dimensions, and it was one of the dumbest things I had ever seen. Of like Gandalf on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, facing off against the Balrogs, like, you shall not pass, blah blah blah, gets dragged down. And it's like, oh, a portal opens up behind Gandalf, and the Batmobile comes out, and I'm like, that is dumb. And I am down for it. And it was like, oh yeah, it's a Toys to Life game. I was like, well, I'm not interested in this anymore. It's a real shame that was such a thing.
Are you alright?
I'm fine, thanks.
Wonderful.
Well, that's the thing. Like, things can be dumb, and you can understand that things can be dumb, and that doesn't have to turn you off from enjoying the dumb things.
Stand on that pressure plate, will you?
It's like you've got stuff like Earth Defense Force,
You crawl through a crack or something?
which is cheesy and stupid, and about soldiers fighting giant bugs from space, and it's ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I was kind of like that.
The gate's closing. Hurry. You did it.
Like the whole like Batman coming out of a portal to help Gandalf fight the Balrog. It's the dumb childhood playing with all your toys at once thing. Like it's crazy and it's childish, and there's just kind of a wish fulfillment to it that's really fun. And it feels like exactly the kind of idea they're trying to revive with that Warner Brothers fighting game they've announced, that Warner Brothers Smash style game. Except, that's just a fighting game. Like, oh, have Shaggy
Done.
face off
I'll
against Batman.
start from here next time.
Have Bugs Bunny take on Arya Stark. It's like, that idea is dumb, and I was curious to see where they were going with it, and then he announced free to play. I was like, oh great, well I guess I'm not playing this. There we go. You mean Smash? You mean the Warner Brothers Smash looks better than actual Smash? I've got problems with Smash Ultimate, but mostly are about the Okay, you're kind of confusing me here, Titanium. Like, isn't that what I said? Super Smash Brothers looks terrible compared to Warner Brothers Smash. Is that what you're saying? There's a Smash clone with Nintendo characters? What? I don't see a lot of stuff these days. You know what your problem there is, Titanium? You've been saying Nintendo Smash, you mean Nickelodeon.
Shall I go on? Now, where was I?
And no wonder I was confused. I heard that was actually a decent enough game. Though it was a case of, like the Nickelodeon kart races. The first two letters, right? Like, they did Nickelodeon kart races, 2 Nickelodeon kart races games before that. And, like, they... If you've never seen those, they are some of the cheapest looking stuff you'll ever see. Especially the first one. It's like, oh, hey, what characters can we have? Some of the most... Like, the 4 Ninja Turtles... 2 characters or so from Rugrats. I think Cat Dog is in there. Like, the character selection is bare bones and weirdly focused. And also, no voices for any of the characters. Yeah, like, that's what I'm getting at. Like, from what I've heard, the Nickelodeon Smash isn't bad, but like it feels really cheap because of stuff like that. Like, they've managed to make a decent enough game on the cheap, but the cheap still shines through. But it's the case of, like, you've got these recognizable characters, you'd want them saying recognizable things that they say. I think we're near the baths. I mean, you know why they haven't done it, and again, it comes down to the cheap thing of, like, either having to relicense the voices, because they can't just use old lines from the cartoons, because that'll be probably a breach of the contracts of the voice actors, or they'd have to pay the voice actors to come back. Does sound weird. Let's say, all I've heard is that it's actually surprisingly good.
The baths.
Alright, here we go. Alright, let's go deal with the others. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the cheapness you're talking about, though, if you've never seen Nickelodeon kart racers, look into it, because you can really see the same thing there. Like, none of the tracks seems to match up with any of the characters and stuff like that. None of the characters speak, which feels really weird for something like that. They're all weirdly silent. I suppose the one good thing about not going to get the voices, that kind of thing, is it stops them from not including characters because of the cost of the voice actor. Like, isn't Nigel Thornberry one of the playable characters in the Smash game? Yeah. And so Nigel Thornberry was voiced by Tim Curry. And so, like, try and get Tim Curry back to do the voices. And, like, you've got two issues that they'll run into. One being the cost, and two being Tim Curry doesn't do a whole lot of that these days since the stroke. Which is, like, a real shame. And so, going for trying to get the voice for that and not being able to would then preclude having Nigel Thornberry as a character. And then there's the alternative you can do of trying to get sound-alikes, which is always risky.
You understand, don't you?
Again, like, that's another point, the cost. Because the licensing of that, the contracts will probably preclude them just being allowed to reuse them like that. Something I was thinking of, and I've lost that train of thought.
I'm all right.
I know.
Oh yeah, the sound-alikes thing. I think we've only done one Nickelodeon game ever on this stream. Because I've never been a huge fan of Nickelodeon. Like, I don't have really any nostalgia for anything they've ever done, or anything like that.
Look. I'll see where it leads.
Probably the most nostalgia I have for anything like that is the Rugrats stuff. But, like, I didn't have Nickelodeon as a kid, so, like, I saw Rugrats on a different channel. Stuff like that. Yeah. Like, the one Nickelodeon game we've really played on this channel, on the stream, is SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom.
Brilliant.
Which is a pretty well-regarded game. Well-regarded enough that it got a remake. But I was playing the original version of it on GameCube at one point for the Sunday Showcase. And, like, it's got all the voice actors from the TV show, as far as I could tell, except Mr. Krabs, who was voiced by Clancy Brown. Who is voiced by somebody who isn't trying to be Clancy Brown. Okay, you know what? I know what I need to do. I'm being an idiot. Yeah, like, he's not voiced by Clancy Brown, and it's very clearly not Clancy Brown. That's because Clancy Brown has a very distinctive voice. Like, whenever you hear Clancy Brown in something, you can tell it's Clancy Brown. Like when he plays Lex Luthor. Or when he plays... What's that other thing? He plays a bunch of the dragons in the first Spyro game. He was the voice of Cortex in Crash 2 and 3, and I think Wrath of Cortex. And Uka Uka. And, like, you can tell it's Clancy Brown. There's also the thing the Venture Brothers did of, like, oh, here's the Red Death. An old-school supervillain. Voiced by Clancy Brown. And it's like, ooh, that is Clancy Brown clearly having a lot of fun with that role. It's great. And Battle of Bikini Bottom very clearly doesn't have Clancy Brown playing Mr. Krabs. New sword. With that kind of thing, that's usually a case of scheduling. Because I imagine Clancy Brown would have been down to reprise his role for the game. It's not like he didn't voice in video games before then, it's not like he hasn't since. So it wouldn't have been a case of like, yeah, I don't want to play this character in a video game. That was probably a case of scheduling. But it's really... It stands out when you play it. You know, I think I might have heard of that, but I don't think I've ever seen it. I have never really been into SpongeBob. I remember when I saw the first episode of SpongeBob way back in the day, and I was like, this is just annoying. And over the years, like, I haven't really changed my opinion on SpongeBob. I still don't really like it. But, like, it's got some good stuff. There's some good stuff in SpongeBob. I just don't like it. But every now and then there's something in there that I'll be like, yeah, that's actually really good work. I really can't deny that. Well, that's true of, like, anything. Anything like that that goes on long enough. And, like, the best example would be The Simpsons. Went on long enough. But yeah, I was going to bring up Fairly Odd Parents as well, because that was a show I was into when I was younger. And then, like, they added Poof as a character. Cosmo wanted to have a kid. And they added that to try and mix things up. And then later on, like, Timmy has to share Cosmo and Wanda with a girl. And it's like, wow, that is clearly a case of you ran out of ideas, didn't you? And, like, there's other examples of that, like, people remember Pinky and the Brain. Who remembers Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain? Which, like, the best thing to come out of that... The Fairy Dog, I didn't even know about that. Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain, and the best thing to come out of that was the theme song they changed. It's what the network wants, why bother to complain? Repeat the vision, I mean this. Oh. And it goes back to the old joke with Poochie in The Simpsons.
Done.
When Itchy and Scratchy is getting stale, and so they add a new character, Poochie. Try and liven things up. And, like, there's the very important point to make with that of, like, Poochie isn't the joke. Poochie is exactly what so many shows have done before and since. I have to go now. Gee, Poochie, you look like you've got something to say. Do you? Yes, I certainly do. I have to go now. My planet needs me. Like, Poochie isn't the joke of that. Because, like, Poochie, like I say, is very much the case of... Shows have done that before and since. The joke of that is actually Roy. The character that only appears in, like, 2 scenes in that. When they're all like, yeah, no, networks add new characters like that when shows get stale. And then this new guy called Roy, who is very clearly just Poochie as a person, shows up, and it's like, oh yeah, no, he's staying with the Simpsons. And then at the end of the episode, he leaves. That's the joke of it. Poochie isn't actually a joke. Poochie is very much a case of so many shows have done that and still do that. And it's always been done.
It's going down.
Every now and then, a show will get lucky with that kind of thing. They'll introduce a character like that, and that character revitalizes the show. More often than not, though, when that happens, the show becomes about that new character. Which in itself is usually a bad thing, because then the focus of the show is changed, and it's very... I think one of the best examples of that kind of thing happening is Dark Shadows. Which was a soap opera. It's probably best known these days for the movie adaptation directed by Tim Burton. Which, of course, was a very Tim Burton movie. Had Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter in it. It was doing a lot of that, and it was just not really that good. Like, if you hear about Dark Shadows these days, it's all about that specific character that was added. Dark Shadows, when it first aired, it ran for like 100 episodes. 100 plus episodes. Before they introduced that new character who shifted the focus of the entire series to be about that. It was always kind of a dark show. Possibly had supernatural elements. But then, at one point, they just introduced a vampire ancestor. And then the rest of the show was about that. And that's a case of it working. So that became the most memorable thing of it. It's a soap opera, honestly. There's not really much point in watching it. There was a movie they did in the 90s of it, which wasn't bad, but again, like, it was like a reboot movie, and had the vampire introduced from the start, because he became the breakout character. And that's how those things tend to go. When something like that goes right, that character becomes one of the main things. I think probably a better example that would be less niche these days would be Captain America. Captain America was a hero created in the 40s as World War II propaganda. And these days is best known as like the leader of the Avengers. Captain America was not in the Avengers for a good while. The Avengers began when Loki takes control of the Hulk. And so Iron Man, Thor, and then the Hulk, when Hulk breaks free of it, team up to stop Loki. And that's how the Avengers first came together. And Captain America doesn't come into it for a while. And then, like, when Captain America was thawed out at one point in the comics, they tried bringing Captain America back in the 50s and it didn't really work. So that was retconned to be a different person. Captain America was thawed out and he joined the Avengers. And then, like, as time's gone on, you generally don't think of the Avengers without Captain America, or Captain America really without the Avengers. And so it's a case of, while Captain America is his own character and the other characters are their own characters, when they team up, you expect Captain America there. Like, that's a similar idea. They added Captain America later to it. Like, it's the case of that. Like, if they'd done the first Avengers movie without having Captain America having already been introduced or in it at all, like, people would have been like, where's Captain America? Yes, I never noticed the dagger glows like that when we run through sand. Or is that because of another reason? Hmm. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, adding stuff like that, either when it works, it pretty much always makes that character that they've added like one of the major characters or the breakout character. When it doesn't, it's just sad. And most of the time, it doesn't work. Sandu. No, Castiel. I think Castiel was a little more natural when they added him. Because by the time Castiel became like the third wheel of the Winchesters, he'd been around for long enough and had established himself as a character through development long enough. Castiel wasn't a character that was introduced specifically to be like, oh, here's the third main character. And Castiel's introduction fit into the expanding mythos of the series. Castiel was introduced in season 4 because he's the angel that pulls Dean out from hell. He goes to hell at the end of season 3. Like I say, I think it works because Castiel, when he arrives, like, is he a help? Is he a hindrance? He's positioned for a while in that first episode of season 4 as, like, possibly a villain to be dealt with. And then his character growth throughout the series, and he's not positioned as the third main character. And I think it works in that way. So when he does become the third main character, you're already accustomed to him, and he's been there for a while anyway.
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
Yeah, I think that kind of thing You know what? I don't think I've ever seen that. The only Inspector Gadget cartoon I saw as a kid was Gadget and the Gadgetinis, which was fine to me because it was like the only Inspector Gadget cartoon I saw. I never really saw Gadget without the Gadgetinis before that. Yeah, I think like upgrading a previously established character from like supporting to main can be fine.
I think I see that glow you were talking about.
Be careful.
Yep. You know what that actually reminds me of now that you mention it like that, Titanium? A character that was more inept than him when one of Gadget's main personality traits was that he was inept. People love to hate on Scrappy Doo. But who remembers Scooby Dumb? Scrappy was Scooby's nephew, who was precocious and always down for a fight and didn't want to run at any point and stuff like that. Scooby Dumb was like, oh yeah, here's another dog who can talk, but he's an idiot, while also being a coward like Scooby Doo. It's like Scooby was kind of an idiot anyway, though. I know there were others, but like Scooby Dumb was the one that lasted the longest aside from Scrappy Doo. I think that kind of thing's probably why Scooby Doo disappeared for a while until like they revived the series with Scooby Doo on Zombie Island.
You do have the strength of loose Tom. That's not the same sword you had before.
Right, here we go into the catacombs. Well, that's really it, isn't it? Like, Scooby Doo was always a one-note series.
Built on the ruins of an even
Red's the leader, Velma's the smart one who always loses her glasses. Shaggy and Scooby are both effectively the same character, cowards who like to eat. Daphne is the pretty one, so she'll get caught a lot. Sometimes she'll be smart, sometimes she won't be, but her main trait was that she was pretty.
I'll go.
It's really the thing with like classic Scooby-Doo, it was always one-note characters. That's why, like, for a while, like, the Scooby-Doo show, which I think is what introduced Scrappy-Doo, like, they just dropped. I think Fred and Daphne were dropped first, and then they got rid of Velma a little later. Like, there's at least 2 separate Scooby-Doo series where it's Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy, and the rest of the gang are gone. Mystery Incorporated was really good. Like, they did the long season arc. They had a mythos to it. It was interesting. It was creative. They made characters out of the characters.
Stay there. I'll come down to you.
There's like even What's New Scooby-Doo, which, you know, is a fun show and has a great theme song and everything. They were still kind of one note in that. Yeah, the self parodies that you get with that kind of thing. The Scooby-Doo movie is such a weird thing. Like the live-action movie, written by James Gunn. Which, like, if you've ever looked into that, it started off as a parody idea of Scooby-Doo. And, like, I don't remember if it was supposed to be R-rated, but it was supposed to be rated higher than it is. But it was supposed to be like a parody of the Scooby-Doo stuff, and then like Warner Brothers apparently kind of chickened out on it and just made it like kind of a straight Scooby-Doo thing, while also being weirdly not in tone with Scooby-Doo. So I'm not entirely sure like what the American rating system for movies is, but like is it PG-13 and then R, or is there something between them? So I know you got PG-13 and I know there's R and then there's like 18 or adults only, I forget specifically. But like is there anything between PG-13 and R?
Here I am. Can you make it?
Don't step off that switch!
Yep.
You made it.
So I can't move here. Yeah, because that's the thing, like, I've heard that originally, the original cut of the Scooby-Doo movie was an R rating because of cleavage. Which is really interesting to me, and I'm kind of curious to see the R-rated cut of that. Because, like, you've got stuff like, OG RoboCop is an R for violence, like, hard violence. Like, they had to cut that movie several times. They had to recut it to get it to hit the R rating. Like, an R, and a hard R for violence is intriguing. Because it's usually because of stuff like nudity as well, or whatever. Just violence, fascinating. But there's the same thing with that. It's like, oh, you've got an R rating just because of cleavage? I want to see, like, just how much cleavage that is. That fascinates me. Because it sounds so dumb. Do you mind? Oh, fucking goddammit, the time.
No, that didn't happen.
It says, from what I'm aware, this is what I've heard of it. That, like, there's... The original cut they had of it was rated R because there was too much cleavage, and they had to, like, digitally cover up cleavage. Which is interesting, because, like, one of the main things I remember when I think back to that Scooby-Doo movie is just, there's the whole sequence at the end. After Velma gets possessed, like, all the characters, when they get possessed, like, they start acting cooler and wear cooler clothes and stuff. And Velma's cooler clothes is... her hair is redone to be a little more stylish, and she gets cleavage. And, like, so a lot of what I remember at the end of that movie is that Velma's just suddenly there with cleavage. God damn it. But I'm really curious, like, how much cleavage gets you an R rating? But yeah, the Scooby-Doo movie was originally like intended to be kind of a parody of Scooby-Doo. And like Shaggy was supposed to be like an outright stoner and that kind of thing. Like, it wasn't going to be a reference, it was going to be just like outright stated that Shaggy is a stoner and stuff like that. And Warner Brothers kind of cowered out about it. Thanks, Farah. It's one of the things that really leads to the first Scooby-Doo movie feeling so uneven in its tone. You've got stuff like, Shaggy's girlfriend is called Mary Jane. And it's like, okay, are we doing this or are we not doing this? And it's always felt kind of weird because of stuff like that. Is it on the level? Is it just genuine Scooby-Doo? Oh, this ought to be good.
Shall I go on?
Intended the PG-13, misinterpreted a joke. They put it at R. They're screening it for younger audiences, so they cut it into a PG range where the cleavage and such was cut out. That's a shame. I was like, an R rating for cleavage sounds like such stupid stuff. I was really hoping it was true. I just love stuff like that, like rating stuff higher than otherwise for really dumb reasons. It's like the fascinating thing of The Dark Knight is a PG-13, and it's one of the most excessive PG-13s you'll probably ever see. And it's like, how did I get that rating? And again, like, movies that are rated R for violence, not for nudity or like even swearing and stuff, just for violence. And I'm always kind of like, and I think that's one of the reasons why the original RoboCop is as excessive with a lot of that stuff as it is. It's like, yeah, no, the violence is getting us a hard R, so let's also throw some nudity and swearing in. Why not? We're already there. And then none of that feels particularly excessive.
Look for a switch.
Just stuff like Clarence saying, bitches leave.
The door's open. I'm going in.
Don't! Wait for me! A soldier's
Love that,
mess
just
hall.
bitches leave.
Smell of food still wafted from the kitchen.
Thanks, Clarence.
Scant hours ago, these tables had been filled with men, joking and
Can you
camaraderie
fly,
about
Bobby?
just as my father's men do back home in Strath, at ease because they think themselves safe within the castle.
Ah, yeah, the OG Tomb Raider side boob.
Thing
Like, the side boob in... the specific scene you're thinking of, I know exactly what it is, because I have a weird memory for movie shit, and... I think we all know that I have memory for that kind of shit anyway, at this point. Can't remember the stuff that I do in my day-to-day life, but I can remember random movie shit from 25 years ago. But yeah, that side boob is like so excessive, it feels like the nipple has to have been like cut out. Like the nipple should be there and it just isn't. I don't know, it's been a while since I've seen that. Yeah, it feels like a really weird idea, doesn't it? Like, oh yeah, no, we rated this R because of excessive cleavage. And you know what that actually makes me think of? The Jackie Chan movie, The Tuxedo. Which is, I think, just PG, not even like PG-13, I think it's just like PG. But there's a scene where Jennifer Love Hewitt, who plays the girl in the movie, because, you know, there's only one girl in every movie, she's the girl in that movie. Jennifer Love Hewitt is trying to distract and seduce the bad guy, and there's a close-up of the bad guy just running his fingers through her cleavage. And it's like, what? It was always a weird shot to me, like, why do that? But like I say, that's a PG movie. Or like Austin Powers, which I think is PG-13. Like the original Austin Powers, like PG-13 with a character called A Lot of Vagina, who has like the deepest cleavage you'll ever see in a PG-13 movie. And so like you look at stuff like that and wonder, how could a movie get rated R for cleavage?
Done. I'll start the story from here next time.
Oh no, there's a really weirdly brutal death for a PG movie in The Tuxedo, like early on, because like the bad guy's got a plan to do evil stuff, and you know what it's like with this kind of movie? Oh, I'm just in the fountain. Like, you know what it's like with this kind of movie? Like if there's a virus or anything like that, they always have to show one person being killed by it so you can know what happens, so you can know what the stakes are. And the bad guy's plan is to like infect the water supply of the United States or whatever with bacteria that'll dehydrate people. And early on, he has a guy drink water that's tainted with the bacteria, and the guy dehydrates, and it's really not a pleasant scene. Like, dehydrates to death. Hmm.
You know I can't climb like you can. What are you doing?
Just wait.
I don't know. I don't know what was going on with that movie. It wasn't a good movie. Temple of Doom, like, how Temple of Doom got away with that? There's also the weird thing, I remember years ago there was a bit on a British panel show that was talking about how the Hammer Horror Dracula movies had been re-rated. And were, according to the ratings board, now considered not as scary as Harry Potter. Which was really weird. Honestly, that would not surprise me. Temple of Doom is weirdly dark and graphic in a lot of places. Let's be fair, like, Temple of Doom is easily the weakest of the Indiana Jones trilogy, but it's got some really good moments. And is also very quotable. Kalima, Kalima, Kalima. Okay. Honestly, like, going back to Temple of Doom, the thing that irritates me most with that movie isn't even, like, all the weirdly out of place horror elements. It's the girl. Willie Scott, played by Kate Capshaw, who went on to marry Steven Spielberg. And my problem with her is that most of her role is high-pitched screaming. And like... Which, like, in particular, when you compare her with Marion Ravenwood and Elsa Schneider from the first and third movies, respectively, it's like where they're both like strong female characters. Sure, Marion gets kidnapped quite a bunch, but she never feels like
And down here.
a pointless character. And of course, Elsa Schneider turns out to be a villain. Which is why, like, the true love interest in The Last Crusade is probably Sean Connery. I'd say Sean Connery is the love interest in that movie.
Don't mention it.
I never had a problem with Short Round. I know a lot of people don't like Short Round, but I never really had a problem with him.
We're above the zoo. We'll need to cross that bridge. Now what? Yes, I was just going to suggest that.
The camels and... Told you, no camels. Compensation for my brother's car.
You did it!
I think like one of the main things like Indiana Jones movies have, it's just been kind of lost over the years, and why they're so much fun to watch, is like just the swashbuckling nature of them is so fun. I said no camels. That's 3 camels. John Rhys Davies is fantastic. Like, his role in the first one's kind of minor as Salah, but like I'm so happy they brought him back for Last Crusade. At some point, I should actually do a full playthrough of the Indiana Jones game on Xbox, shouldn't I? Emperor's Tomb. Yeah, like, I feel like a lot of the swashbuckling nature of those movies has been kind of lost. Real shame, like, the last movie I remember that had that kind of style and fun to it while still being adventurous and erotic like that, I think was probably The Mask of Zorro with Antonio Banderas. Not the sequel. Not the sequel, Legend of Zorro, because that just wasn't very good. Just The Mask of Zorro. And, like, he's got the charismatic protagonist and like the really fun fights and everything, and a villain you can just love to hate.
Help me!
Sliders. I've never actually watched Sliders. I've only ever heard about it from people who watched it at the time, and I don't think it's actually available on anything over here. And I heard like it got really shit in like its 3rd season after John Rhys Davies left. John Rhys Davies is just one of those actors, like, anytime he shows up, he's usually really good. There we go. John Rhys Davies in Lord of the Rings. There's Gimli. I think I found out actually the other day. John Rhys Davies was in the Trial of the Incredible Hulk. If you remember, like one of the, I think it was like the conclusion movie of the old Incredible Hulk TV show. He was in that playing Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. Which is like, you know, that's actually a really interesting, fun concept.
Story from here next time.
Yeah, that feels like a bunch of other TV shows I've seen. Eventually, the main crux of it just kind of falls by the wayside, for whatever reason. Well, John Rhys Davies is he's one of those working actors, isn't he? Like you'll find him in probably like quite a few bad things, just being good in it because he's an actor who understands sometimes you got to take some shit. I always like actors like that. The actors who will still actually put effort into bad stuff, or at least have fun with the bad stuff.
I'll just wait for you here then, shall I?
Like Ben Kingsley. Ben Kingsley was in the Blood Rain movie. Like if you watch that, Ben Kingsley is clearly having at least a little bit of fun with that. And when asked like why did he take the role in that, like he always wanted to play a vampire.
It stopped. Pull it again.
I think I see how this works.
Which is pretty cool. Like, you know, for an actor like Ben Kingsley, be like, yeah, no, I want to play a vampire. So I did this bad vampire movie and had fun with it.
Now pull the lever.
Yeah, I was actually gonna like turn that back into that. Because the Sands of Time movie is weird as a video game adaptation because you were talking before of like how Sands of Time has the best plot of the Prince of Persia games. And it's like, yeah, it does. But for the Sands of Time movie, they decided that wasn't good enough. So they created this whole new plot. And Ben Kingsley plays the king's brother. Like, not the evil vizier or anything. He plays the king's evil brother who orchestrates an assassination on the king and has the prince framed for it. The prince, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who isn't actually the king's son. He's the king's adopted son, but the king also has two other sons. And Alfred Molina's in it for some reason, being as entertaining as Alfred Molina is. It was needlessly convoluted.
Hang on. I'm pulling mine.
Yeah, Ben Kingsley just like fantastic. Like you go back to Iron Man 3 and people were not happy that Ben Kingsley's Mandarin was a fake. Which I guess spoils if you haven't seen Iron Man 3, but surely if you're interested in Iron Man 3, you've seen it by now. Like, people aren't happy that Ben Kingsley's Mandarin was fake. But I loved his character in that. Like, his character was fantastic. Like the whole Mandarin persona, and it's like, oh no, he's just an actor. He was an out-of-work actor. They recruited to play the role of the Mandarin.
If you can fit
And
up
then
this
when
way,
Tony Stark actually
I'll be
meets
impressed.
the character, like, yeah, no, I'm just an
I knew
actor.
that hole was
And
there.
like, he's just this really fun character. That was great. I loved it.
Keep running!
It's not just that it's an 8-year-old movie, it's an 8-year-old movie that, if you were interested in seeing it, you'll have seen it by now. You know, with the whole MCU being, like, the biggest entertainment property ever. I have seen Shang-Chi, I don't really want to mention it because it's only recent, is the thing. Although the fact they actually did bring the Mandarin into it, it's like Shang-Chi and Legend of Ten Rings. Is it a spoiler that the Mandarin's a part of, like, the actual Mandarin's a part of it? No, because the Ten Rings was always what the Mandarin was about.
Sorry.
But yeah, Shang-Chi, like, only recently being out, like, that's, yeah. It was a nice full 10-ring circle. That's twice Farah. Shang-Chi, though... Shang-Chi is basically the best example of my current state of interest with the MCU. Of, like, we got to Endgame. Like, the big thing we were building up to since the beginning. We got to it, we did it, and now I just don't really care anymore. And, like, if I have the option to watch one of these MCU movies, I might. But mostly if it's standalone, I don't care about these big connected narratives anymore. Spider-Man Far From Home I am interested in, but that's largely because of, like, nostalgia and stuff.
The switch is broken.
And, like, the curiosity of, like, they're bringing the old villains back. It's like, am I down to see Willem Dafoe be the Green Goblin again? Yes. Absolutely. Like, the fact that Sam Raimi kept bringing Willem Dafoe back, even after the Green Goblin died in the first movie, was, like, one of the best things of that trilogy.
Alright. You go on down. I'll find another way in.
Try not to take too long.
Oh boy. It's actually a fun thing, like, if I ever do the first movie game for Spider-Man, like, they got Willem Dafoe to voice the Green Goblin in that. And it's one of the best things about it, because, like, oh hey, we got Tobey Maguire to play Spider-Man in the Spider-Man movie game. Like, great, but he also sounds really bored, and uninterested, and uninteresting. Willem Dafoe, though. Like, Willem Dafoe is clearly having fun with that. It makes me think of, like, there's this one behind-the-scenes bit you can find from Spider-Man 2. Of Sam Raimi talking to... Alfred Molina. Okay, so... There's a specific way I want you to play Doc Ock. And we've got this guy in to show you how I want you to do it. And, like, he brings Alfred Molina onto the set, and it's just Willem Dafoe in the Doc Ock arms. and it's just stupid and ridiculous, and it was funny. You know, Willem Dafoe is great. And Willem Dafoe having fun is also really good. Boy, this is going to be one of those, isn't it? I didn't watch the American
I'm up here.
Death Note. Largely because, like, I had no interest in it. I'd gone past Death Note years before.
I'll show you.
But also, like, it didn't sound good.
You to say.
But Willem Dafoe as Ryuk was... I was, like, immediately when they said that, like, you know what, that's actually a really good choice, I'm down.
Here I am.
Stay there. I'll come down to you.
I know
I think
where
you
I
remember
am.
none of it.
This gate leads to the baths. Do you think you could find
I
your
remember
way
watching
there?
the,
Finding my way to the baths from here should be
I've watched
easy.
the Japanese live-action movies, because that was a two-part movie. And you know what? That's alright. It's enjoyable enough.
I'll just ask the first sand
It
creature.
also helps with that movie
Direct me to the
that
baths, please. We'll thank you.
they
Mention
got
it
the
to your
voice
bath
actor for
next time
Ryuk from the
I'm
anime to voice him again in the movie.
I'll meet you at the baths. She orders me around as if I were a servant. It's my own fault. With women, you need to show them you're in charge right from the start, or they'll walk all over you. I've been too indulgent. Probably because I felt sorry for her. Well, it stops now. From now on, she'll have to toe the line. That is, assuming I can find her.
Alright, so we're about halfway through the game.
Done. I'll
Apparently.
start the story from here next time.
So this would probably be a good point to call it and come back and finish it later. Later on today. Well, I'm gonna have to go.
Shall I go on?
But yeah, where's that? But a little under 3 hours. Shouldn't take a huge amount of time. I also want to look up. We've got the cave system coming up just after this area, and there's an unlockable there that's hidden, and I should look up like exactly where that is, so I can grab it because that'll be pretty cool. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining the stream today. I always really appreciate the support. Big special thank you to everybody in the chat for keeping me company. Ox and Titanium, thank you so much for keeping me company, guys. Chat is always the best part of the stream. I'm going to be back on later tonight to finish this, and depending on how long that takes, I might do something else. Because I also have Jedi Outcast right here. I might jump into that. Oh, it's all good, Titanium. Like I say, thanks for keeping me company. There's a good company makes the streams more enjoyable for me. Honestly. It's like I always say, like, chat is what makes the streams. That is the best part. Cannot at all underestimate just how important chat is to the streams. So thanks for being here with me, Titanium. But yeah, finish Sands Time later, seeing how, depending on how quick it goes, and how I feel. We might jump into something else, like maybe Jedi Outcast, which I've been wanting to do like since I got it on Xbox a couple of weeks back. Or maybe I'll just jump into that Indiana Jones game and we'll do that properly. I don't know. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic time of day, and hopefully we'll catch you later. Take care, guys.
You